After doing their time in the Israeli Defense Force, 3 former soldiers knew that militaries could spy on people's phones. So they brought this to the private sector and built NSO, a company selling spyware called Pegasus. They essentially democratized spying. The big countries with famous security services like Russia and China, presumably they were able to read people's phones. But suddenly there was software that Hungary or Nigeria could buy and use to spy on their citizens. And that's exactly what they did. Soon, we learned that 2 EU member states known for their autocratic drift, Hungary and Poland, were regularly spying on politically active citizens, journalists, and political opponents, any critical voices they don't like, violating their fundamental freedoms. Even in Greece, the EPP conservative government used their security services to use software like this to spy on journalists and the opposition, citing national security as a justification. 1.5 years ago, the European Parliament set up a committee of inquiry, the PEGA committee, to investigate this affront to democracy. The committee just issued a report asking for pan-European legislation to regulate such intrusive surveillance software and protect innocent citizens from abusive governments. Welcome back to Take a Left, the podcast of the Socialists and Democrats in the European Parliament. We're here with Hannes Heide, our lead on this file, and Vice President Katarina Barley. The podcast is now on video, so if you're listening on Spotify or similar, feel free to check us out on YouTube. Hannes, if you have nothing to hide, why do you object to the government reading your messages?
Would you go naked through the streets? Maybe voluntarily, but if you are forced to, then you don't want to. And of course, we have privacy, and there are things we don't want that other people know about us. And when I go into school classes and have a discussion and I introduce myself and I tell them I'm a member of a PEGA committee and I tell them what it is about and about this surveillance spyware, then they are afraid.
Yeah.
They do not like the feeling to be permanently observed, and so there is also a fear. And of course, we have rights not to be spied on or completely. Everybody knows completely what we are doing or going to do.
What's so shocking for us about this particular spying? What's different to this?
Well, a lot of people don't really know the dimension of this software. It is literally as if someone had your mobile in their hands. They can not only read everything, see everything, hear everything, they can also manipulate. We have had one case in Poland where a politician found his private chat messages on the TV, but manipulated, so even changed. So there is no limit, actually.
Over the course of the committee's work, we found lots of people being spied on. Like, what was some of the more shocking cases? What was the most stuff that was most arresting to you?
Actually, it's all shocking.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the people who have been attacked with this spyware, it's. We met a prosecutor. We met a politician. We met trade unionists. We met, of course, a lot of journalists. People who didn't do anything wrong, nothing. They just, on the contrary, they actually pursued what they had to do. For example, the prosecutor was very active investigating on corruption issues. And then she found out 6 months after it started that she had been spied on for 6 long months. And then you think back, what did I do in these 6 months? And it's not only you, it's your whole surroundings, it's your family, it's your friends, it's your colleagues that you talk to. Because, I mean, you and I, we have our mobiles now in our pockets or lying on the table. So it's everything you do. I mean, some people go to the bathroom with their mobile phone, or you have it as your alarm clock. You have it next to your bed. Just think about this. It's absolutely shocking, and that countries, member states of the European Union, attack their own citizens or others with this sort of spyware without them having done anything wrong. This is just a nightmare for every Democrat.
Talking about countries using Pegasus against their own citizens, even within the EU, it's shocking that Poland and Hungary presumably have done that, but also not completely surprising. But then we found out that in Greece, our former colleague Nikos Androulakis, the leader of PASOK, had been spied on, as well as the far left. Was that a shock to you?
It was a shock to see what's going on in Greece. It's not only this, and um, it is part of a bigger picture. In Greece, you have a massive backslide in media freedom. We have seen the murder of a journalist 2 years ago, which has practically not been investigated until, now there is public attention on it, and now they start, but for 2 years nothing happened. And we see the EPP, who usually in cases like this is up in arms and defending media freedom. We've seen murders of journalists also in 2 other countries, well, 3 by now, but it was Malta and Slovakia. And there they were, we have to do something. But Greece, total silence. It's an EPP government, and then all of a sudden, nothing going on. So the situation of democracy and rule of law has become worrying in Greece, and then this Pegasus scandal, gives a new dimension to it. Then
The EU Parliament set up this committee of inquiry, and one of the first actions you did was go to Israel. What did you find there?
I was surprised because I went there and I thought it's widely seen as a business model. When you talk to the people there, and not only to representatives of the State of Israel or the distributors of spyware, when you talk to people to journalists, representatives of civil society, they see it as a tool for security. Most say a weapon. Surveillance spyware is a weapon, but it's a weapon that should be used for security reasons and for security reasons only. And this is an approach I share because I also am aware that to fight international terrorism, to fight organized crime, or to fight child abuse, then it should be the possibility to be used by the state, but under a very strict legal framework.
Poland and Hungary using spyware was shocking, but also perhaps not so surprising. And then we saw that Greece was spying on the former S&D MEP Nikos Androulakis.
It's a shock how easily some countries, some governments use this surveillance spyware. And I'm also surprised how they are arguing and how easygoing it is for them. And I do not see any privacy of citizens. I do not see a working of the rule of law in countries like this with the approach they have. And Poland and Hungary, some representatives, also some colleagues here in the PEGA from the ruling parties also told, why are you afraid of being spied? Yeah. And I find it funny because one of them was using this argument to say, if you don't do anything, then you haven't to be afraid. And when we were talking with the people here in the parliament that scan your mobile phone, they asked the question, what happens to my data?
Yeah.
So you see, it's not, there is a narrative official narrative from the government, but there is the feeling from people, from citizens to be safe and secure.
What about Austria? It's mentioned in the report, and it was embarrassing for Sebastian Kurz.
For me, it was very surprising because I thought I'm going into this PEGA committee, an investigating committee, and there wouldn't be no relation to Austria. And there were rumors when we were in Israel that Shalev Julio, the CEO of NSO, has contact to former Austrian Bundeskanzler Sebastian Kurz. He denied. And soon after, it was announced that Sebastian Kurz is founding a company on security of critical infrastructure together with Shalev Julio, and they talked about it since beginning of the year, so for a long time. And he's also working for Peter Thiel, who is responsible for Palantir, also for surveillance in the United States. So there was a connect between these. And I was also surprised that there is a company in Austria that was producing and distributing spyware, which is not longer doing. And these two complete separate stories were in the report, and Sebastian Kurz defended himself that he said, I never had anything to do with this company, and the report doesn't say he has had to do with it, but he was using it as an excuse and telling people in his tweets that it is a false accusation and it's not true.
And of course, the former darling of the EPP, Sebastian Kurz, who thought he was going to be going further. But
yeah, it shows that there are problems for some darlings, because also Mitsotakis is strongly involved in such a scandal in Predatorgate, and it's absolutely not acceptable that a member of European Parliament, opposition politician, is spied on by spyware only to get information for the ruling, for the governing party.
it's also a concern about how we can have free and fair elections if you can just find out what the campaign manager of your opponent is doing. I wanted to ask about the conclusions of the committee. After 14 months of work, of hearings, of speaking with legal experts, journalists, people who were spied on, what did the committee find? And should the EU ban software like Predator or Pegasus?
So there were discussions about the ban, there were discussions about the moratorium, and a kind of moratorium is recommended in the report. But what surprised us, and what surprised, I'm sure, all that followed the work of the committee, is the dimension of use of spyware in European member states. It reached into so many sectors of our public life, opposition, politicians, civil society, NGOs, representatives of the law system, and it's absolutely unacceptable how widely it was used, and often it is an excuse on national security, but you have to have an independent judicial body that allows the use. And what I have already said, there are of course some parts in our life where it should be used, and it's the fight against terrorism, against organized crime, and for safety and security of children, and to fight child abuse. So this is acceptable, but it needs a legal framework, and the legal framework is very different, and it should not be possible anymore to hide behind national security.
Are you optimistic that will change? You know, we're here in the House of European Democracy politely asking for this.
Be sure that there is a change, because there is a wide interest, and if you talk about surveillance spyware, the reaction of the people is, it could happen to me. And it's for the safety and security of European citizens that we have a legal framework that is the same, and it's within the rule of law, and it is within European values, and that is what we, as Socialists and Democrats, want to guarantee our citizens in the European Union.
People should be allowed to be free to live their lives, I guess. I'd just like to ask, do you think you sure they're not spying on you? You have your phone on you now?
I have my phone checked quite regularly.
Yeah.
We have the possibility to have it checked here in the Parliament. And every time I go to critical countries, and when I come back, I have it checked. And like every, 3 months or so, I do, because I'm not sure. And I try, for a lot of reasons, not to have my phone always with me, and not to,
Yeah.
because we all have become junkies, more or less. And looking at my children, I sometimes think it's such a waste of time, most of the time. So yes, but I do it myself, and I try to do it less. So I'll just leave it aside, the stupid thing.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's one solution. Katerina, thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Hannes, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.